Hi, everyone. I'm Ravi Kapur, and I'm joined today by Rajiv Malhotra, the famed author, scholar. Very pleased to finally sit down with you in person. I've heard you on many venues, ranging from Clubhouse to YouTube, but it's nice to finally sit down with you in person during your Bay Area visit. I wanted to talk about, well, first, let's talk about your latest book before we get into your career. You've got a new book called Snakes in the Ganga. Talk about why you decided to write this particular book.
So the book is on the latest things that are affecting the world, not just India, but the United States also. And that is this whole wokeism culture, which is a derivative of Marxism. People don't want to admit that, but it is. Marxism and postmodernism applied to race in America became critical race theory. Now that's fine because I have sympathy with the blacks and they suffered a lot and they need some help, and I'm fully on board. But then the problem is when they started mapping it onto India and started saying that the caste hierarchy is a race hierarchy. And so if you belong to a certain community, then it's racism. Actually, caste is also not an Indian term. It's a Portuguese term. It's a European idea. The caste system, what we now call caste system, was developed by Lord Risley, and then he turned it into his caste censuses. There used to be a Varna and a Jati system, which is quite flexible, very different. So in this book, there's a huge chapter on the history of Varna, Jati, and how it became caste. And so now that they've essentialized caste as though it's a eternal, permanent fixture from the very beginning of our tradition, they've started calling it racism. And then there's this whole movement called Dismantling Hinduism, because Hinduism is racist. So obviously, if it were racist, then it would be a good idea to dismantle it. So this is a whole nefarious agenda. And Harvard is the epicenter of the logic, the theory, the research being done. Because of its brand name, it can get away with a lot of stuff that's not substantiated. So we are pointing out all the flaws in some of the important work done at Harvard. And also the role of Indian billionaires. A lot of Indian billionaires like Mahindra and Mittal family and Piramal and Bajaj and Tatas and all these guys are involved in funding this because it's fashionable to fund Harvard. So if you can get your name on a building in Harvard, it's pretty cool. So people are funding that without knowing what exactly the effect is. That's being done with their money and with their family name. And so one of the big casualties of this that we point out in this book is that IITs have been attacked as racist. IITs that they support upper caste Brahmins and they oppress Dalits. And so the whole structure from the very beginning of this engineering education was designed to oppress the Dalits. And so this is pretty serious stuff. And now they have filed lawsuits against Cisco in this area and on this very basis. So we are going to the foundation of these claims to see if they are valid or not, and we are finding that there are lots of holes in them. But there is a huge tidal wave of these consultants who promote these theories in Silicon Valley, demanding that there should be workshops to sensitize the management, which is fine, there's no problem with that. But up to $75,000 an hour is what they're charging, almost like blackmail, if you will, that you do it, and if you don't do it, you'll be in trouble. And also censuses, they want to do caste censuses of Indian workers in the tech industry, which would be quite embarrassing. Why single out one community and start doing this kind of a census? And this has ramifications back home, because once this becomes HR policy in the United States, it'll also be applied to Microsoft and Apple and Amazon and Google in India, and also applied to their outsourcing. So the whole tech industry in India will be typecast in this way. And rather than merit being the criteria for people to advance, to get into IITs and advance, which is what it is, it'll all be caste quotas and stuff like that. So this is a very serious issue, and we decided we should do a whole book on it.
Now, don't some of these tech companies who are multinational, don't they have kind of caste policies, caste discrimination type policies already in place for the workers in India specifically?
No, they don't. They're based on merit. I don't. To the best of my knowledge, they don't prejudice against what caste you are. Nobody even knows what caste you are. If you're a good employee, you're a good employee. I mean, I used to be in the tech industry, and I didn't know who belongs to what caste. I had people from all nationalities. I had Polish and Japanese and Chinese and Koreans and English people and Spanish people and Germans. I had many people in my little mini, multinational, small-scale multinational, and I never bothered about who is who in terms of their identity or religion or race or whatever. I just look for performance. Most tech people want a very high-quality performance. It's very demanding. And if you start looking for, it's like if you have a sports team and you start balancing out the race and the caste, your team will lose because you're not going to get the best players. You're going to get players that are politically correct. So if you are competing against tough competitors like in tech or in sports or in military or anything like that, you cannot afford to have identity-based politics inside your teams.
But I think this is a more recent thing. I mean, obviously your career, you've expanded beyond tech now. You've been running the Infinity Foundation for decades now. But, here in Silicon Valley, I've certainly seen the term caste in some of these employment policies. I mean, most recently, the hot story of the day is Twitter and how Elon Musk has acquired it. But even more recently, when you look at some of the terms and conditions, especially if you want to be an employee, I mean, I do see caste being used in select companies. Maybe it's not.
No, but used in what sense? Tell me.
Oftentimes it's regarding employment.
No, but in employment, what about caste? What does it say?
Well, again, I think we've seen in recent times a number of tech companies, and now with Santa Clara County, there was a caste discrimination effort to apply that.
That's a result of this recent trend. That's a result. That's what we're talking about. Right. That's the issue we're raising.
Sure. No question. I mean, this is not something I saw 10 years ago. This is something I've seen really in the last 5 years, which is why I wanted to talk to you.
2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
2 or 3 years.
Absolutely. No question. There's actually a lot of context to get into because we were the only network that covered the Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference, which happened roughly about a year ago. Really, I think a lot of people were kind of stunned to hear that a lot of academics, and not just individual professors, but they actually had something like 40 universities that had allowed their name to be used in that context. Let's go back to that conversation briefly about this, because I know a lot of these things you've been battling for decades, which maybe almost solo, it seems. Tell me about the concern about having academics raise concerns, because obviously we're all open to criticism. Your scholarship is open to criticism. Their scholarship is open to criticism. When you look at an effort like Dismantling Global Hindutva and you have people with PhDs who ostensibly know a subject matter better than the average person, what do you have to say when you have prominent universities and these professors all joining forces to do a 3-day event like that?
Yeah, so that is the whole issue. There is a whole cabal. Academic freedom is not free. There is no such thing as academic freedom, but there is a cancel culture. A cancel culture means that you are free to pursue what you want, provided you agree with me. If you disagree with me, we'll cancel you. Cancel culture is one of the deep-rooted, phenomena of our times in the humanities and social sciences in the academic world. And cancel culture is justified in the logic of the wokeists because they say that the hegemonic people, the dominant people, have built the narrative for all these generations, and now the underclass needs to take over and build the narrative. So you can only achieve it by canceling the dominant voices. So if you are the dominant voice, and the current narrative is based on people like you, we got to cancel you and give others a chance. So it's almost like reverse discrimination to get even. So therefore, you cannot have free speech. You cannot have people who are on the correct side of identity can say anything they want, and the other side cannot even respond, cannot raise questions. So when you have a workshop in Microsoft, which they did on caste sensitivity, a lot of Indians who were sitting in these meetings, they wrote to me later, they were very embarrassed because a lot of complete nonsense was being talked about their heritage, but they were told, do not raise an issue, do not disagree, because then you'll be considered racist. So you just have to sit there and put up with it. So that's not freedom. That's a kind of a hoax being called freedom. So I think we are in trouble in the sense that the entire intellectual world, liberalism has been used to champion free speech and let everybody speak, no matter who they are, what their view is, and we'll give everybody a chance and let people decide. That was the spirit of liberalism. But now it's not the same thing. Now things have gone beyond liberalism, and so this wokeism is actually attacking conventional liberalism. It doesn't have the ability to accept dissent. So it's like a religion. It's like a religious dogma that we have started. And so all these people, 400, whatever, there is a large Hindu-phobic movement in this country and in the Western world. I coined that term about 30 years ago because there was a term called Islamophobia, And I Googled Hinduphobia, no hits, but Islamophobia, tens of thousands of hits. And so I figured, I was looking at prejudices in the schools, in colleges, in movies, in media against Hinduism, but there was no term. So I started using the term Hinduphobia. Now, later on, people found out that in the 1800s, somebody had used it, but they had not used it in the context of today's academy. There was no American Academy doing these kind of things in those days. There was no Freudian psychoanalysis. The kind of professors, the kind of logic, the kind of data they're using now was not being used 100, 200 years ago when somebody might have used that term. So for all practical purposes, the term as being used today, as it applies today, is something new that we started about 30 years ago.
Take me back 30 years ago to when you began this part of your career, because you had a prolific business career and you decided to pivot to go into nonprofit work. And you've gone down a path that I think is obviously very unusual. You might be really one of one. I think in more recent vintage, you have some other folks that are kind of supportive of your work, but you started this well in advance of anyone else that I can recall. Talk about what triggered you to move in this direction.
So that's a personal journey. That's a very private kind of a thing. I mean, I had some spiritual experiences, and they convinced me that one should have enough in life materially, but not more than enough. So I had enough, and I had in some ways more than enough. For my age and for considering my humble beginnings, I did quite well for myself. So I decided that I should do something bigger, which is not selfish, which is not about me, but about society, giving back. And in our tradition, we call it yagna, which means giving back. And so in the fire ritual, you're giving back material things, but that's symbolic. It's symbolic of the whole attitude, your lifestyle of giving back for a higher purpose. So I decided I'll do my yagna of giving back to my heritage, and not just for the benefit of our people, but all humans, because I found that so much richness exists in our culture, which would have value, whether it's a meditation, yoga, whether it's vegetarianism, whether it's the ecosystem, whether it's family life, whether it's the whole philosophy. You could go on and on. So we need a seat at the table when people are developing curriculums, when they're developing new lifestyles. We need a seat at the table to bring our ideas out, and we haven't been allowed to. So I thought I'll just give up everything and dedicate my life to doing two things. One is bring out the contributions of our culture that have not been brought out properly. The second is to defend unfair attacks against our culture. And nobody wanted to help me. Our own people not interested in helping. Many temples, including ones here in the Bay Area, not interested in a talk like that because it's too controversial. They just want to do their pujas and their bhakti and their devotion and just go home and, lie low, in spite of having achieved so much in their careers and in their business. So I felt that was a cop-out, and somebody had to stick their neck out.
I will say that I meet a lot of very successful Hindu Americans around the country, and most people don't put their Hindu identity first, right? And they blend into the crowd. If they acknowledge themselves, they might acknowledge themselves as being Indian American. More recently, I've certainly, the trend amongst younger people is South Asian. I've noticed that over the last decade. Quite a few Indian Americans identify first as being South Asian. Talk about these trends, the vernacular, the language that's used to identify people from our community, because let's face it, that does shape a construct about who we are.
So the South Asianization started at Harvard in the 90s. There used to be a department called Indology and India Studies. That was a traditional term the British used. British never had South Asian studies. They had Indology, which is the study of ancient India. So this department is called Indology and Indian Studies. And Infinity Foundation, my foundation, was giving a lot of grants to these people and to support research and appointing visiting professors. Twice we appointed a visiting professor at Harvard with our huge amount of money. And for several years, we had a conference on Indology that we used to sponsor. So that was then. But then things changed. There was a political shift, and some of the people on the extreme left aligned with Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, and they decided that with Indian studies, those other countries were not getting enough play. Whereas if you make it South Asian studies, India is one of 7. India is one of 7 countries. So the problem I saw is that when there's a committee making decisions, India gets 1 vote out of 7. It's Myanmar, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Maldives, all these countries would get a vote. So India loses its place. On the other hand, China studies is China studies. It's not East Asian studies. China is a region of its own, given its own space and studied as such. So it's not that China is dissolved along with many other countries into a Southeast Asia or East Asia studies. There is the term East Asia, but there is also China studies. India studies got sort of dissolved. I fought a lot against it. I fought so many battles about this because I felt that the sense of being Indian is important because the population is so large. It's an important country. But the Indian government didn't want to do anything about it. They were also supporting the South Asian. You see, I never got any support from the government, including the current government, in any tangible way. Maybe moral support politely behind the scenes, but not anything concrete. Never got support from any of the big Hindu gurus. They wanted to just pursue their own business success. They're running little multinationals. No support from the political groups in this country or civic groups in this country that are supposed to champion our culture. So this has been a one-man fight.
It's a good point you bring up about the government. So theoretically, you would imagine the Indian government would have a vested interest in how their perception is around the globe. And we know that definitively when it comes to the Chinese government. They're out there very actively here in this country. The overwhelmingly, I would say 99% of the Chinese American media is largely subsidized or supported by the Chinese government. I know that firsthand working in the media. The 1% is basically alienated. And if you associate with that 1% of kind of dissent against the Chinese government, well, you could be absolutely isolated. So tell me about what the Indian government's role should be and why they have not wanted to shape their own image.
I think it's incompetence. There is something in the Ministry of External Affairs. There's a body called ICCR, Indian Council of Cultural Relations. And that is present all over the world in every embassy. They own the Nehru centers. So then they have a minister. He runs this thing out of Delhi. So there is a body that is supposed to project Indian culture, but they project dance and songs and poetry, and they don't get into issues of substance that are controversial because they don't have qualified people. And they neither serve as the eyes and ears, writing the kind of stuff I'm writing to inform people in India what's going on, nor do they serve as people who can give a rejoinder and a response. They don't conduct workshops for our youth to learn how to project your identity. They don't do any of that. So there is a government role, there is a government body, there is also a Ministry of Culture in India. Huge budget they have. They should be doing this. There is a Ministry of HRD, for Education Ministry. They should be doing this because part of the education should be to correct the history of ideas, the history of Indian science and technology, the history of Indian thought, the history of, the whole Indian history, including the history of all its contributions. So whether it's the Ministry of External Affairs or the Culture Ministry or the HRD, Education Ministry, they're not really doing their job. So they are emotionally wanting to, but they're not helping us either. On the one hand, they are happy that I'm doing it because they're not able to do it. On the other hand, they're not willing to offer concrete help, because they're just very parochial. They want to hang on to their own power and do these things themselves. But even in the new government in the last 8 years, they have not had the capability, the competence to do any of this stuff.
Let's go into the term Hindutva. I just Googled you for the first time before we sat down. I just wanted to get a sense of what people say about you. I've heard you speaking in different venues, but quite literally the first sentence about you is that you are a Hindutva activist. I've never seen those two words put together, and I've never seen that on Wikipedia. So tell me about this, because Hindutva has now become kind of a buzzword amongst certain groups trying to apply a sense of what Hindus are in the United States.
See, first of all, I classify myself as a scholar, not an activist. If somebody doesn't want, people should know the difference. A scholar produces scholarship, and I produce 9 books, which I would say 99% of the scholars in the academic world studying religion have not produced this much output as I have produced. So I have produced more scholarly output than most scholars will in their whole life. You can check that out. Most of them will write 2 or 3 books, and small little books, and they'll keep writing on the same subject. The bandwidth isn't there, the depth isn't there, the impact isn't there like I have produced. So I'm a scholar by merit. I don't need credentials where somebody has to stamp it on it. I have produced the output like you're a software engineer if you produce software. And if you produce a large amount of high quality software for which there's a lot of demand, and you produce patents and all that, then you are a software developer. It doesn't matter whether you work for Microsoft or you work for yourself. It doesn't matter. So I come from that kind of background where merit counts, and based on merit, I am a scholar. Activist is somebody else. Activist popularizes emotional ideas. It takes certain positions that scholars have developed and brings them out into the general public. So if A is a scholar and B can take all this all the knowledge that A has produced, as an activist can spread it. Spreading awareness is what the activist does. I end up doing that because nobody else is doing it for me. I have to do it myself. But my primary interest and my primary contribution, when all is said and done, will be the scholarship I have produced and not the activism I have done. So whether it's Hindutva or whatever it is, whatever the topic they may consider it to be, I'm a scholar of that, not an activist. So that's the first thing I would say. Second thing is this business of Hindutva and Hindu. When I started out in this career, this new career of mine with my foundation, I used to call myself the non-Hindutva Hindu. That was my brand. I used to sign myself Rajiv Malhotra, the non-Hindutva Hindu, because I didn't want to be associated with politics, Hindutva being political. I wanted to be associated with the spiritual dimension, the meditative dimension, the scientific dimension, because I have a lot of consciousness studies was my field. In the science of consciousness, that's what I wanted to study. And I didn't want to get, politics in the middle. So I called myself the non-Hindutva Hindu to keep all the political people out. And for a long time, I differentiated this, and I didn't want anything to do with the Hindutva. But eventually, I realized that, the attacks on me and on anybody having anything to do with Hinduism are so intense that we have to close ranks. It became a pragmatic decision that, there are people who are Hindutva activists. If they're willing to support me, fine, I should allow them to support me. So I would go to very important centers of learning with a contribution to make, to present, and they would say, but you are from the wrong identity, or it's threatening to them because Christians had claimed some of these Hindu ideas as their own. Some scientific people had taken my meditation and consciousness and tried to claim it as their own. And I was criticizing that because I felt that they were plagiarizing. They were plagiarizing my tradition. So they didn't like that. So I had to find some group somewhere that I could work with. And I found that the Hindutva establishment, the Hindutva institutions were very receptive to me. And so I said, fine, I'll work with them. And so I became friends with these guys.
Can you define that for everybody? Because obviously I see some groups defining it in that political context, that Hindutva is a violent movement. Then I have some folks say, hey, Hindutva is the essence of Hinduism.
So let me tell you what I think. There is an actual word, Hindu Tattva means Hindu essence. So that's what it literally means, Hindu essence. But when you look at the people who founded the term, Savarkar, who created this term, it was a social political emphasis rather than an inward journey meditative emphasis. It was social political emphasis. That nothing to do with violence. It's not violence. So let's not mix social political activism as violence. He wanted to decolonize, reclaim our identity, and go back to our traditions, our scriptures, and this requires new education. It requires new awareness of people. And that's not anything to do with violence. I would not condone violence. I don't think he condoned violence. So I think people who say Hindutva is violence, they have to make their case and establish why they're saying that. It's like saying, if you are an Islamic person, you're violent. Or if you're a Christian person, you're a child molester. I mean, it's that sort of a thing. So let's keep the violence allegation out of it because I don't think there is any substance to that. What I feel that there is that if you look at Hinduism as the broad, idea, you don't want to use the word ism because isms are Western appendages. So you don't want to. So what do you say? You say Hinduness, as you say Hindu Dharma. I mean, nobody calls that violent. So Hinduness and Hindu Tattva is the same thing, and Hindu Tattva is what is Hindutva. It is an abbreviation for Hindu Tattva. So in a sense, Hindutva is Hinduness, and there's nothing different. You cannot say it's different than Hinduism. A lot of people want to attack Hindutva and saying we're not attacking Hinduism. They want to claim that, but they're cheating. They really, when you look at them talking to each other, they're attacking Hinduism also. Just in front of the public, they don't want to be accused of being bigoted. So they'll say we're only attacking Hindutva because it's violent and all that stuff. You see. Now, Shashi Tharoor wrote this on, book on Why I'm a Hindu, and in that he argues why he's not Hindutva. And he argues against the whole political dimension. But Ramayana is a Hindu text, and Lord Ram is into the social political dimension. I mean, he has to fight a war. So that is part of Hinduism too. And Sri Krishna in the Mahabharata has to fight a war, has to get people to fight a war. So activism in the external world, as opposed to yoga, meditation, going inward, tantra, those are inner technologies that we have. The outer requirements of keeping a society together is very well enshrined in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So those who say that this particular dimension, like Shashi Tharoor says that this particular dimension is recent and not responsible, it's irresponsible, and it's not really a part of Hinduism, well, they have to ask the question, they have to address the question, what about Ramayana and what about Mahabharata, which are, taking on opponents in a responsible, ethical manner, including violence for defense purposes if the other people cannot be taken on any other way. So I don't think that you can exclude the tenets of Hindutva as being un-Hindu.
There are people who say Hinduism has nothing to do with violence. Gandhi being the big example of a non-violent movement to free India. What do you have to say to that part of that criticism of Hindutva?
Well, he has to explain Mahabharata. He has to explain Mahabharata. He has to explain Ramayana. I mean, he hasn't done that properly. So, it's for him to explain that. I don't think there is any civilization in the world which has a history free of violence. I don't think the Jews have it. I don't think Muslims have it. I don't think the Christians have it. I don't think the secularists have it. Maoists have it. Marxists. No civilization in the world has 100% clean record. Let's just get that out of the table. And I can accuse your faith of doing some wrong things in the past. You can accuse me, but what does that get us? What humanity needs to do is two things. Every faith should look at itself and get its act together and clean up its act going forward. Saying, okay, we made our mistakes, we've done wrong things, but I'm going to clean up my act. That's what every faith should do. And then collectively, we should take the best of each, not the worst of each, and see if we can build a humanity out of that. So if out of 10 things, you have 2 really good qualities in you, and out of 10 things, I have 1 or 2 good qualities in me, and somebody else has some good qualities, we should pick those best qualities, the best features, and move humanity forward in that way. So we shouldn't be knocking each other down. The knocking each other down is the result of conversion. Because I want to convert your people, I want to knock you down and say that you're no good and you're going to go to hell, so you got to convert over to me. That competitiveness to take over market share from each other is the cause of religious violence today. So that's the problem. The problem is that there is the hunger, appetite, greed, expansionism. Religious institutions want to take on more and more countries, have bigger footprints, capture more land. Because, if you can convert some people, then their land belongs to you. They report to your church, and your church tells them who to vote for, decide the politics, and your footprint in the market share in the world expands. So this is a kind of an expansionist ideology. The conversion, religious conversion, is a sort of expansionist ideology. And that is the foundation of religious violence. If it weren't for that, I think religions could get along in peace, because they would say, you practice your faith, I practice my faith. If there are good things about each other, we can help each other out. And if there are bad things about your faith, it's your business to clean up your act. I'm not going to go after you. And if there are bad things in my faith, I got to clean up my act, because for the sake of my own people. That would be a better interreligious dialogue and interreligious relationships.
The criticisms towards Hinduism that you've seen amongst the academic world, other faiths, do you think they're founded? And if so, where does Hinduism need to maybe clean up their act?
Yeah, I think some of them are founded. But we don't need outsiders to do that because, we've had problems in the past, but there was a bhakti movement that started to clean up some of the problems internally. So if you look at the history of our faith, if you look at the history of Christianity, they've come up with many revolutions from within. There was no Chinese invader or some Arab invader that went there and forced them to change from the outside. It never works. You have to bring about change from within. So our culture is full of revolutions from within. And so are other cultures. They've all had movements where things go too far in orthodoxy. So there's a wave that wants to topple things, but from within. So I don't think that it's the job of somebody in Harvard or Stanford or someone else to tell me how to fix my faith. I think these guys are full of problems in their own faith. And you look at what's going on in Western society. You look at what's going on in the Judeo-Christian world and the Islamic world. They have plenty of things where they need to clean up their act. And they have no track record of solving other people's problems. I mean, foreign intervention has never worked out for other people. Whether it's foreign intervention in Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq, foreign intervention has only left destruction. It hasn't left, a happier society. So if Christianity thinks that by converting to Christian, you're going to be a better society, then they should look at the problems in their own society. They got so many problems. They got drugs. They got, murders. They got depression. They got suicides. They got, parents, single parent homes. They got all kind of stuff going on. And you look at the people they've converted. You look at some of these poor countries they've converted Mexico, for example, right, our neighbor. And they haven't, it's not like it's a perfect society because they become Christian. So Christianity hasn't been able to get its act together either in its home base in the Western world or in the non-Western world where it has gone successfully and converted. Similarly, Muslims. I mean, Saudi Arabia should be a role model of society because it's the Makkah, it's the headquarters. But so you look at the statistics of social abuse and political problems in Saudi Arabia and lack of human rights and all that, it's hardly a role model. So these faiths and these political configurations have a lot of homework to do in-house before they start saying, I got a solution, I'm going to fix you. They have no right to come and force a solution on others when they haven't been able to get their own act together.
Let's talk about some of the personal battles that you have faced because you are on the front lines and you're a target constantly. Now, again, you're one of one. There are many other folks following in your footsteps, but I have seen you personally attacked by some of these academics and activists who use you by name, call you right-wing, which I guess is a trope for some folks. And I'll name names. I mean, Professor Audrey Truschke at Rutgers. I see you castigated by any number of academics who call the folks involved with the Infinity Foundation non-academic. Can you take me through some of this stuff? I know it's hard to deal with any kind of personal attack, but it does seem very personal to you.
Yeah, so, I'm used to it. I think there is jealousy because these academic people have not produced. There was a time before I got involved when the only people teaching our faith were these academic scholars. So if you wanted to learn Hinduism, you take a class and you read a book by a professor. That was before the internet. That was before people would travel on their own and learn about society. That was before yoga studios came up everywhere. That was before all the movies and all the media educated people about each other's faiths. So now, if you want to learn about somebody else's faith, you could take a class if you want to for academic reasons, but there's a million other ways you can learn. There are so many nice books, nice movies, documentaries, websites. You can go to ashram and take a course. So actually, the monopoly of the academy for teaching religion has gone away. And they're very concerned because they don't get funding. You don't need to, their class sizes have gone down. I remember when I first came, a Hinduism class in a college would be mostly white people. There were hardly any Indians. Those Indians hadn't come in big numbers. So white people wanted to learn about Hinduism, would go take a class in some local college. And these professors were very powerful because there was no option but to listen to what he has to say. So they were ideologues. But now that's not the case. Firstly, the mix has changed. A lot of people sitting in the class are Indians and they know their faith better than the professor does. And they can raise their hand and say, that's not what we do in our house. What you're saying doesn't make any sense. So the professor also on the defensive. And at the same time, the student has so many options. They can go online and check whether this guy is making any sense or not. So the problem, the reason they're fighting is they think I've spoiled their monopoly. I haven't. This is going to happen anyway. But they think that I'm the fall guy, and they still, in many of the profiles about me, they say that he's the most consistent, persistent, and original critic of the academy. In some ways, maybe I am. So there is a hatred, there is a kind of animosity based on that. But I want to tell you that there are also people who go after me, who attack me from within our tradition. From within the Hindu tradition, there are people, I don't want to name and mention names, but you know Kona. So Kona is very much championing a certain lady who is a scholar who really doesn't like me because she would like to usurp the work I have done and claim it as her own, claim herself as leadership. So there's jealousy in our side. Jealousy in the sense, you pioneered, you put in 30 years, you've achieved a lot. I'm this young person. These people weren't even born, or they were maybe teenagers when I started my work. So I've been there for a very long time. I'm 72 now. So, they cannot stand the fact that I have a huge legacy, and they are in a hurry to bypass, and which is very unethical, and it's not in the Hindu spirit, but that's the ego. So they want to take shortcuts, cut me out, and get ahead. And so I find a large amount of animosity and attacks from within the Hindu community by people who want to get ahead, and knocking down seems to be their way.
Oh, you're welcome to name names. I mean, you don't have to be shy in this forum.
Yeah, but I have enough enemies already. But they know people know who I'm talking about.
Take me through the political dynamics, left versus right, India and the United States. It seems like folks conflate the left versus right in this country versus what we see in India. Can you discuss that for a moment? Because I don't think people fully get it.
So, one should understand what is meant by left versus right in the Western context. There are several ways you can be a conservative. There are several criteria. You can be a conservative in economic policy. So if you believe in free market capitalism, that's a conservative. Whereas if you believe in socialism as an economic policy, that's more left-wing. So one is an economic, lens. Another is religion. The people who were conservatives were into the church, and the church was the orthodoxy, the authority. And the people who revolted against it were more kind of liberal and classified as left. And then the third criteria is race. So the right wing was a term typically used for people in the power structure who tended to be whites. And the left wing were people who wanted to break that down. So if you look at, there are three criteria I've mentioned. One is economic criteria, one is religion criteria, one is race criteria. Now, a left-wing person doesn't have to follow all the three. There are people who call themselves left-wing, but they are left-wing by economic policy, and they are whites, and they are not championing blacks, but their economic policy is liberal, you see. Then there are people who are liberal by race policy. They're championing the equality of all the races, but they are into capitalism. They are capitalists. Some of the big capitalists, some of the capitalists who run Google and all these multi-billionaires, they are big-time capitalists. But they may have an ideology which is supporting the blacks and Hispanics and so on. So you cannot say that there is a very fixed idea of right-wing and a fixed idea of left-wing. Within these terms, there are many variables. Now, when you take it to India, it becomes even more complex. Because, you have to ask, was Gandhi a left-wing or a right-wing? Okay. So now, he was a Hindu. He was a very strong Hindu. He believed in caste. He upheld the caste system. In fact, he had so many fights with Ambedkar, who wanted Gandhi to dissolve and disown the caste system. And Gandhi said, no. He said, we'll fix it. We'll make it cleaner and not prejudiced, but we don't want to disband it. So Gandhi was a solid Hindu in that sense, and a very orthodox Hindu, who believed in caste, which would be considered very right-wing. So in that sense. But Gandhi, in terms of his economic policy, he was a socialist. He didn't want a big business and big industry. He didn't want machines made in Manchester making cloth. He wanted cloth made by hand. So, his whole revolution was a grassroots economic revolution to disempower the British Empire, which eventually succeeded. So was Gandhi a left-wing or a right-wing? He was left-wing in economic policy. He was left-wing in his attitudes towards, minorities and so on. He was right-wing because he believed in Hindu orthodoxy. So the conventional labeling does not apply. I mean, I don't think that I'm a right-wing or a left-wing. I have a lot of left-wing ideas, right-wing ideas. And I think this is a very moronic, it's a terminology for people who are not very smart, who cannot think deeply, and they just want a label.
And when you say Gandhi believed in caste, are you talking about Varna and Jati, or are you talking about the construct of what the West talks about in terms of
He
caste?
believed in substance, well, in terminology, he used the word caste, but the argument he gave were for Varna Jati. He was really referring to Varna Jati, but he talked about it in caste terms. And sometimes he talked about Varna Jati. So I would say he supported the Varna Jati system. And he was very strong about it. And he felt that it protected societies because it was like an extended family. Your Jati will protect you, kind of like a big family. And you don't need social security from the government because your Jati will protect you. But this abuse where some Jatis have prejudiced against, we should get rid of that. That was his view. That we should have Jatis, we should have communities. Like in the United States, you have communities, a lot of different kinds of communities, but you don't have to have them in a hierarchy and birth-based privileges. That he wanted to remove. So I would say in that sense, he was a revolutionary within the Hindu system who wanted to change Hindu society. A lot of good things he did. I disagree with him on many, many things, like his attitude towards, the global Islam movement. He supported this movement of global Islam, and I think that was a bad idea. And he made some compromise with the British also, but overall, he was a revolutionary.
When you look at the term caste, now this is relating to your new book, this is becoming the new kind of hot button term. I had a conversation with an American media executive, and when I talked about what we do, running an Indian American network, the second question out of his mouth was, well, tell me about the caste system. Like literally, this is supposed to be a sophisticated media executive. The second sentence was about the caste system, and I was astounded. Since I was born and raised in the United States, my mentality is completely different. But obviously, there's a lot of folks ascribing that there are casteists amongst Indian Americans, Hindu Americans, even amongst those of us who are born and raised here, who may not have any idea about the political system or the caste system within India. So what do you have to say to that?
So I think this is a masterpiece by our opponents to put us on the defensive, to equate caste with race. Wilkerson, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, wrote that famous book, and Oprah championed it, and it became the #1 New York Times bestseller. I've written a rebuttal to that in this book, Stakes in the Ganga. There's a rebuttal to that. There's another chapter which is a rebuttal to a book by Ajanta Subramaniam, which attacks the IITs as casteists. There's another chapter on the work done by Suraj Yengde, a Harvard guy, who says that the Africans and the Dalits are the same. And the Dalits are the blacks of India, and the non-Dalits are the whites of India. So all of this all these prominent people have been propped up, and they're working together. So it's become a huge movement that I'm surprised that in Silicon Valley, right here, many of the well-to-do Indians don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it, but it's going to chase them. It's going to come after them. Now, those who are very rich don't have to worry because they made their money. But what about the middle and junior people who come from India, who are still struggling and wanting to go up? They are facing huge prejudices. There will be restrictions on them. There will be biases on them. You will be considered, if you are a young Indian in the tech industry, you will be considered suspect just by nature of, you are this person, you're a caste, whatever is your problem. Are you a racist? So you have to now constantly get on the defensive. And that's very unfair. So I think there needs to be a pushback, which is why I wrote this book.
Take me through what these Indian Americans who are trying to get along with everybody, blend into American society, don't want to deal with these kind of issues that may just hit them in the face one day. What advice do you have for these folks?
Well, I think you either go to the problem and deal with it, or the problem chases you. And this is one of those cases. You are in denial, the problem won't go away, it's going to get worse. And so I've written a manual, and this is a big book, but you don't have to read the whole book. You read the introduction, and you read the overview of every chapter, it's one-page overview, and you'll get the gist of the whole book. And then whichever chapter you like, you can go deeper into that. You don't have to read cover to cover. So we spend a huge amount of energy and time to develop this so that people can get an idea. They don't have to read 10,000 pages like we did. to develop all this knowledge. If you are well informed, you can talk back. You can argue back. You can explain your point of view. You can put the other person on the defensive. You can show that you know your stuff, but you have to have some knowledge. So I know people are not going to read, weeks worth of literature, but they should be able to read a few hours, which is what we put together in this book.
Now, also another recent term that we have encountered is something called brahmanical patriarchy.
Yes.
Talk about where that's been developed from and your answer to that.
So in critical race theory, the idea is that white supremacy is the problem, it creates all the problems. And in American society, whether it's good or bad, whether it's right or wrong, is not for me to say, but that's about American society. It's not about Indian society. So, and also patriarchy comes from white people being male dominated. Okay. Now, I don't think that's fair, because my own observation is that there tends to be male dominated in non-white people also. I don't feel that's the case. And then this business that the suppression of LGBTQ is also a white patriarchy project. I don't even know if that's true, because Muslim countries, it's illegal to be LGBTQ. So I don't think it's all white, Christian, straight, male problem. And that's what critical race theory targets those people. And then when this critical race theory is applied to India, it's pretty bad, because they take this white patriarchy and they call it Brahmin patriarchy for whatever reason. So it's become Brahmin patriarchy is the problem of all the gender issues in India, all the caste discrimination issues, all the issues facing LGBTQ. So basically, the Brahmin patriarchy is just a buzzword to hit out at the non-Dalits.
You brought up a gentleman that I've actually met in person at the Harvard India Conference. We've actually sponsored it as a network for about a decade. So sometimes you meet people, you take them at face value, you don't know their scholarship, you don't know much about them. But Sir Youngday, I've met him in person. I've met a lot of folks that.
So you should invite him to have a discussion with me. You should moderate.
I was happy to do.
You should tell him, Suraj, he criticizes you because you criticize his heritage. You both criticize each other. So why don't we sit down and have a conversation? And we'll be respectful, but I'll give my points, he'll give his points, let the audience decide. We can do it at Harvard, we can do it in some other place, we could do it online. Wherever he wants, I'm available. Could you please suggest him?
But tell me specifically about the Dalit movement. There's a very significant Dalit movement in recent vintage, getting a lot of support from even government entities. Yeah. Tell me about where that's started from and your thoughts about that movement.
So the Dalits have a genuine gripe. The Dalits have a genuine gripe in the sense that in modern times, they're not doing economically as well as other people are. But you cannot accuse the ancient Vedic system as the cause of that, because there were eras when Dalits when the Shudras, they were called Shudras, and scheduled castes and tribes were kings. So it's not like they were always poor. It was not that way at all. Some of the people who were classified as low caste were not economically disempowered until recent times. So, you have to look at what happened during the thousands years of Islamic rule, what happened to Indian society, how it was broken down, and then what happened during the subsequent 200-300 years of European rule. So India has been ruled by foreign religions and foreign races for 1,200 years or so. So therefore, the result of all of this societal disruption is that we have a society that's messed up in certain ways. And so as far as things that today are concerned, I have sympathy for the Dalits, and I think we should fix those problems. We should, in fact, using these categories to decide who gets jobs, who has how many quotas is wrong. It's simply enhancing the differences, enhancing the tensions among them. It should be merit-based, and an individual who has personal needs because he comes from a poor family should be given benefits. It should be not caste-based, but need-based. So whatever your caste is, whatever your ethnicity is, whatever your religion is, if you are below a certain level in terms of your material resources, you should be given a boost, regardless. There are poor Brahmins, by the way, and there are rich Dalits also. So if you want to encourage those people to come up, you cannot just hold them down artificially by saying you're classified as oppressed, because that's a negative psychology. So I think that the problem is real, but I don't think the solution is a good one.
Give me your thoughts on all of these different social organizations that have popped up in recent vintage, Equality Labs being one of them. That's a kind of a Dalit rights organization. More recently, there's another group called Hindus for Human Rights, the Indian American Muslim Council. A lot of these groups have kind of coalesced. I'd say maybe 24 of them. We saw in concert with the DGH kind of conference from a year ago. We've seen other efforts now to do events and coordinate and lobby and bring members of Congress onto the stage. Can you talk about this movement at large and what kind of impact they hope to create?
So that is the target of our book, this book, because these are political movements, but there is a scholarship being supporting all that, and that scholarship is in many universities, but Harvard is the main one. Harvard is the producer of this kind of scholarship, and all such people who are anti-India, anti-Hindu, Hindu-phobic get nurtured, get sponsored at Harvard. They are brought in as VIPs. They're given a stamp that, hey, you are a good guy. And if you write against India and against Hinduism, they'll invite you. I had some events in Boston a few days ago, including one at Harvard Faculty Club, where the discussant was a very famous, one of the most famous Harvard professors, a Christian, very well-known Jesuit. He and I discussed, and he agreed with my findings. He agreed with this book. He said these are true things, that there are all these issues in Harvard coming from the extreme left, the secular lobby against religions, and Hinduism is on the spot particularly. And then there were so many other people in the discussions who are students or faculty at Harvard who stood up and supported me. They said, unless you are anti-Hindu, the papers you write and the position you take in class are anti-Hindu, India, you are not going to be given prominence. And if you toe the line ideologically, they will encourage you. So there is a whole system to encourage this sort of stuff that you're talking about. There is foreign funding. There is something in the MIT called JPAL. J is the name of a Saudi guy, big shot, some Saudi sheikh, and PAL stands for Poverty Action Lab. So JPAL is his funding of MIT to alleviate poverty in India. Now you wonder, why is Saudis funding MIT to resolve poverty in India? Well, it's being done in the guise of solving poverty, but actually it's to infiltrate Indian society and create havoc there. There's plenty of problems that they can solve right in MIT's own backyard. There's a lot of poverty there in Boston, and there's even more problems right in Saudi Arabia. But the idea, so I think this whole meddling from overseas, I call this Breaking India 2.0. The byline of my book, Snakes in the Ganga, is Breaking India 2.0. These new forces are the new forces that are threatening India's sovereignty.
Give me your thoughts on India as a secular nation. India as a Hindu majority at the moment. Where do you think this is all going? All of this effort to, have a narrative against Hinduism or India. Specifically, I see obviously a lot of anti-BJP, RSS, HSS, all of these different organizations. You see the term paramilitary used often as a phrase to conjure up hostility. Where is this going? I mean, where do you see this going?
I'm not part of those organizations. I've never been in the RSS, VHP, BJP, never for a single day. I've studied them as an outsider. I have some sympathies, some disagreements. I work with them. I have friends who are there. So that doesn't mean I'm part of these organizations and I owe no allegiance and they can defend themselves. I mean, I don't have to defend them. They can defend themselves. I do feel that as an observer, I feel that they have done well in representing that there is a problem. But I think they haven't gone far enough. They haven't created good educational material. They haven't created good research on who's who in the world, studying our culture and what is it all about. They haven't done the kind of work I'm doing. They should be doing it. They should be sponsoring these conferences that we are doing. They should be. So I don't see in any of these organizations you name quality leadership. There are really thoughtful intellectuals that are deep and serious. Nor do I see an acceptance on their part that, hey, there are people on the outside, we should help them. So they're trying to do it internally, but they don't have the capability to do it. So therefore, progress has been there, but slow. And I feel that the forces that are against the nation state, against the sovereignty, there's China, there's Pakistan, and there's all these internal forces. and combined with external nexuses, these are gaining speed at a rapid rate. So I'm not confident that India will be able to handle this much challenge in the years to come.
Do you think India, as we see it today with the borders that we see today, the physical borders, as well as all of this conflict potentially on its doorstep, is it going to be able to withstand these challenges?
Well, China is becoming very powerful, and there's no easy way to resolve that. The United States is not going to put boots on the ground to help India. India has to do it on its own. India has the longest disputed border in the world with neighbors, with China, Pakistan, longest borders, hostile borders. So it's a huge drain on India's whole thing, psychology and military and economy and all of that stuff. Besides this China threat, Pakistan is wobbly and may fall apart. It'll not be necessarily good news. It may result in something similar to Afghanistan, a meltdown of a nuclear power with a whole lot of factions and ethnic groups fighting each other. Right on your doorstep, it's going to overflow. So I see in the next few years, both the China threat and the Pakistan falling apart threat, combined with the internal fermentation, all that's going on, and the external intervention that I'm writing about, these four forces, the internal social fermentation, the external interventions that we're talking about, and the China-Pakistan political threats from the boundary, will require an exceedingly robust country with very good weaponry and very good military, very solid economic growth, strong government, and very patriotic elites, not billionaires who are sold out like they currently are. And that is something that we don't have much time to pull that off.
Finally, you've had a prolific career. I know you have more to do. Tell me what else you want to get accomplished.
So I'm 72. I have to finish 20 more books, get them out. 2 per year. I want to do 2 per year. And these are books that are written. It's not like I have to start from scratch. I've written, the first draft is done, and there are books on, each book is a major topic of research that I've put a lot of energy into. And I've written, talked about here and there, but I haven't published. And so now I need to sit down and sometimes I need help to clean up the diagrams, to write the bibliography, to do the fact checking, to clean up the language. All that takes a long time if you want to be a perfectionist. And you look at my books, I've tried to really be a perfectionist as much as I can, with all my limitations and all my weaknesses and flaws, but I've tried my best. So I have 20 more to put out, and I want that to be like I'll have produced 30 books, and it'll be like 1 or 2 bookshelves because they're all big. And this will be a corpus. You can produce a whole curriculum. You could produce a whole curriculum on the study of India and its contribution to the world, not only historically, but also the future of humanity. Because I think that the ideas here that we are trying to bring out of Indian origin have value to all human beings.
I'd be remiss to let you go without asking, do you think Hinduism will survive?
Yes. Hinduism will survive. Maybe it won't be called Hinduism. Maybe it'll be in the stomach of Christianity because they're learning a lot of these things. It'll be in the stomach of, Judaism because they're learning a lot of Hindu ideas and renaming them. It'll be in the name of science. A lot of this stuff is being classified as medicine and public health and lifestyle. So I think Hinduism is being dismantled and digested in different forms, made a part of different areas of the West. So as Hinduism, known as Hinduism, it may or may not survive. I hope it does, because then you lose a lot of value if you don't have a center and you don't have everything together. Ideas of Hinduism will get absorbed in many different things and survive over there.
Is there anything that can be done, whether it's the government action or obviously devout Hindus that want to change
Yes, I mean, that's why I'm here in Silicon Valley, trying to spread awareness, get some traction. I have a list of 11 projects which my foundation wants to fund, and each one will describe what it is and how much money we need. And if we get them, we'll fund them. We'll carry them out. We have a good track record of doing what we say, a good track record of delivering output, and we can deliver a lot more output.
Rajiv Malhotra, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.